We have now a lovely panel to talk to. We have people you've met before, Nicolas, Jan, Kevin, and Sue. And I noticed you, Nicolas and Jan, nodding vigorously during the conversation. I'm sure that our online participants were as well. So she touched on the theme of interconnectedness, something that you're very keen to champion. Nicolas, talk about that.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Absolutely. I visibly nodded because I think here there is something very, very strong, and especially with cities. Referring to what I said before, there are numerous cities, let's say global cities, etc. But if we consider that there is about 1,000 cities or urban agglomerations, over 500,000 people worldwide, right? Then one question, and that covers significantly what urbanization would be about. Then the question differs completely. It's not just about implementing solutions here and there. You cannot just implement solutions in one city and then pretend to go to over 1,000. It's a system approach, right? And it's quite tempting to go deep in system approaches. Scientifically, for the mindset, it's extremely attractive. But then, when it comes to how do you intersect that with democracy, for example? How do you intersect that with managing local and global challenges? We probably do not have the tools, I mean, collectively, intellectually, but also politically at this very moment. And the COVID-19 pandemic, in that sense, is a very painful reminder that something escapes from us. So we're constantly trying to struggle and get access to and get hands-on. We have the solutions, right? And on the other hand, we also see, and with the acceleration of a number of transformations that are probably also triggered and accelerated exponentially by urbanization, that something eludes from us, right? So how can we work on the one hand on solution hands-on, and how can we also grab this part of everyday life that eludes from us? I think this is a very important question.
Thank you. Jan, you come in here. She also highlighted the importance of mayors, so you're on the spot.
As you know, I've been working as the mayor of Helsinki for 4 years, but before that I spent 7 years in the Finnish government. So I have experience for both from a national and a local government, and I mean, even in our countries, there is a huge difference between a local and a national government. So the national government, they work with big policies and big initiatives, and of course they have the legislative power and some huge resources. But then on the other hand, local governments are working the grassroots level. They are very pragmatic. We are real life problem solvers in real life. So it's a totally different point of view. But we both are working with really wicked, complicated, huge problems. And we both play a big role. And that is why we need a much, much better cooperation between the local and national government to start with. And then, of course, everything should be based on science as much as possible. But that, and especially from a local government point of view, is not an easy issue. I mean, because of the fact that we need the so-called comprehensive approach and a holistic view, and even a view in the future, and then make like decisions and solutions in today's real life, heading to the future, trying to cover all possible angles, when science in most cases only tries to tackle a very specific issue.
Thank you. Kevin, please.
Well, thank you for having me again. I mean, this is truly interesting. I mean, let me just say, generally speaking, the communication between scientists and scholars and policymakers, including at the local urban level, it's not simply a matter of substance and content. It is also about the the format and the vehicles used by scientists to convey their knowledge to policymakers. And let me cut to the chase, and I've been on all sides of this fence, right? Because, I was in government in Costa Rica, but then I've been an academic and I've been a practitioner and I've been all sorts, I've worn many hats. Policymakers need advice that is easily digestible and free of jargon, short, timely, and politically aware. Most of all, advice that understands the constraints that they have to operate under on a daily basis. And quite frankly, these are not skills that most scientists, including social scientists, get as part of their training. I wish most scientists and scholars would get public speaking classes and training to write clearly and succinctly, because that's what it takes to be politically relevant. And let me add, for the sake of the discussion, also that the timelines of science are not the timelines of policy and particularly of politics. Everything in politics is front-loaded. It is about immediate pressures, and we have to be aware of that. And let me also add that politics, as was said here before, politics is about managing conflicting pressures. It's about managing conflict. And therefore, and I've lived through this, when you're a policymaker, and particularly when you're a politician, you operate in this perpetual gray zone of suboptimal choices. So the scientifically pure option is never an option. And we have to be aware of that. And to the extent that we are, our scientific advice stands a better chance of being politically relevant.
Thank you very much indeed. Important points. Sue, I'd like to come to you. There's much to take away from this. The delivery of the information is a very important piece, and Francis also emphasized the need for trust to be built up, and also this point about the suboptimal nature of decision-making. Cities are a place where I suppose compromise is king, and you can never optimize because everything is so interconnected, as we've been saying. So, Sue, some comments.
Yeah, Adam, I think we've got to be very careful that we don't say that cities are so complicated that there can be no opportunity for science to provide evidence or to inform decisions. That's just simply not true. It certainly is a very complex environment. We've got lots of scales that influence what happens in cities. We've got lots of different actors. We've got a whole lot of different forces that are interfacing: water, waste, transportation. But I think what has become, there's a very interesting discussion within the scholarly community about what you need for a more effective urban science. In other words, not what do you need from an engineer or what do you need from an air pollution narrow specialist who themselves has to talk to lots of different bits of government, but how do you begin to get a generalist specialist who can help to think about the future of cities? And that discussion has really focused on understanding that there are many drivers of urban change, that they happen at different scales, understanding what the really important issues are so that we focus on the big questions, not on the little questions. And as Kevin says, and on delivering some of those messages in the right way, and as Francis says, to the right people. But to do that, you have to understand government. And at the end of the day, people who run cities will make the political decisions. But the scientific community has to understand and track and analyze the dynamics that are going to inform those political decisions. And when we don't have that, we have appalling cities. And we can learn a great deal from other organized communities. I think of the medics, who are very much better organized, to think about how you should deliver science to policymakers. And it's in that context that we're trying very hard to get scientists to talk to each other, perhaps even before they talk to the people who run cities and who live in cities.
Jan, I'd like to pick up on that, and also this phrase, generous specialists. I like it.
This reminds me of a headline, I think it was it Sunday Times or some UK paper who had a headline during the COP26, according to which nation states came with promises, cities came with action. And I mean, that is true. And you need them both. You also need the promises, but then you also need action. And this reminds me of another story. I think it was the former New York Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia who once said that there are no different Republican or Democratic solutions for cleaning the streets. So I mean, I somehow oppose the issue that, or the idea that everything would be political. So I mean, science, of course, and I coming from Helsinki, Finland, I think there are few, if any, countries and cities which believe more in science and data and knowledge. But still, in the practical everyday life, I mean, science, it gives answers to questions why you should do something, maybe what you should do, what you should aim at, what you should try to avoid, but not how to do it. And that is issues which mayors are handling and solving each and every day.
Thank you. And yes, Nicolas, especially from your perspective of working so closely with the G20 on this.
Yeah, I was thinking, listening to our conversation, about two things. The first one, we should always never forget to be about somehow humble and modest, because when you look at what kind of document we have internationally, right, regarding cities, there is a frame, that is the Habitat 3 conclusions, the big summit that took place in 2016. When you look at the new urban agenda, which is practically the only one that there is internationally at UN level, this new urban agenda, which dates back, I would say, only from 2016, is completely silent, not a single word about the risks of pandemics and the risk of infectious diseases. So, I mean, it's like the elephant in the room, right? And we were so many working on this document, etc. And then it's edited, and just a couple of years afterwards, there is a massive pandemic, and everybody says, oh yes, there's a pandemic, it's a major catastrophe. So instead of asking ourselves why we were so blind, let's go to another set of solutions. I think this is here a very important lesson. The other thing is, when you look to where these urban issues can be governed, economically in particular, we think there is the group of 20, the G20, for example, right? And there has been attempts, and a couple of people in this room or virtually have been part of that conversation, to insist on the role of cities within the G20. There is a group of cities, an urban 20, right? But somewhat it's the deliverables and the conclusions are uneven. I would say that we need now local governments, regional governments, national governments, especially at such a scale, to team up and say we need a G20 pact for sustainable urbanization. And we need to foster that across science, across action, etc. And this would be plenty of stuff enough for the next 2 or 3 years to cross the lines also with development. This is the kind of directions I would say we would collectively need to explore and foster.
But when you mention, we haven't got very long, but when you mention this lack of the pandemics in a document produced 3 years ago, then presumably policymakers would then turn to scientists and say, well, why didn't you warn us? If this was coming, how did you not tell us about this? And so somehow that's a gap that needs to be bridged. And what is wrong in that conversation? Because of course scientists didn't know it was coming, but it's odd that it's missing completely. How do you bridge that gap?
There have been considerable loopholes. I think each and every one of us would be somehow responsible for those, for acknowledging those loopholes. And I would say it's not a very good answer, but the answer would be what lessons do we learn from that? Right? We need to learn powerful lessons for not having been aware.
Okay, 15 seconds each, Jan and then Sue.
My point is that we have had shocks, we will have shocks even in the future. We don't know what kind of. The more resilient cities and societies are, the better possibilities they have to walk through those shocks relatively well.
Thank you. Sue?
Some scientists did say that there was an urban health risk and that it would be a pandemic. It was said loudly and clearly. It wasn't always taken up by the medics, who were completely dominated by biomedical research, and urbanists put their focus on something else. And so one of the difficulties is about making sure we get scientists to talk to each other to deal with the urban challenges we face.
Thank you. Everybody needs to be talking to everybody is, of course, the conclusion. Thank you all very much indeed. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you for the time.